Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Alyssa, and in 2023, my sister and I launched our podcast called Culture in Between, which explores the unique experiences of people who grew up in a culture outside of their parents' culture. And we were new to this whole process of podcasting and had to do a lot of research to discover what was needed in order to successfully launch our show. So in this video, I want to share the tools and information you'll need in order to launch a podcast of your own. It'll be less of the how to put your podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because I find there are a lot of resources on those topics, and it'll be more of the kind of behind the scenes things, like, for example, what is an RSS feed? What is hosting? What tools can I use to create design assets? What tools can I use for scheduling, for remote interviews? Things of that nature is what we'll cover. And if you're more of a reader than a person who likes to watch video, I also have a complimentary blog post that I'll link in the show notes below. So with that, let's dive in. The first thing we'll talk about are RSS feeds, which are the backbone technology used for most podcasts. An RSS feed is essentially an XML file that's generated for you by your podcast hosting platform. We will cover podcast hosting platforms in a minute here, but this file just contains important metadata that popular platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify use to distribute your show to their platforms. And so the RSS feed ensures that whenever you published a new episode, it'll automatically get distributed across those different platforms. And the best way to really know what an RSS feed is to take a look at one. So let's start off by looking at ours for Culture in Between. And I'm sure you're looking at this right now and you're like, wow, that's a lot to parse. And it is. But if you're familiar with HTML, it's kind of similar, where there's like an opening and closing tag. And so if we look at this feed here, we see it contains metadata like the title of our podcast. There's just an image, which contains the main image that we use for our cover art. There are multiple items here. And because we have multiple episodes associated with our podcast, there are multiple items. And so if we take a look at, not that one, if we take a look at this, our top item, this is our most recent episode. And in it, you can see the title, the date it was published, a description, more metadata that Apple Podcasts uses. So this contains all the metadata, like I keep saying, that the respective platforms use to be able to determine what to render in their UIs. And so since we've talked about RSS feeds, now let's go on to hosting, because in order to have an RSS feed, you need to have a host generate it for you. And there are a myriad of different hosting platforms out there that will manage this for you. We personally use Podbean. I don't have any affiliation with them or whatever. It's just what we use. But I've also listed a ton of different options, like there's Buzzsprout, Libsyn, Transistor, Castos. This is just a subset of the multitude of options out there. It really kind of depends on what you're looking for from your host. Like, some of them have varying pricing tiers that are more affordable. Some provide more AI features. Some kind of vary depending on how many hours you can upload, things like that. So it will vary depending on what you want for your show. But Podbean just kind of fit the bill for us. But yeah, there are a ton of options out there. And so once you have a host, you can now generate your RSS feed. Okay, so the second thing we'll take a look at is music, because at the very least, I'm sure you'll want an intro and outro music that can be played throughout your show, because music and sound design can really set the effect of your podcast or the tone of your podcast. But it's important to ensure that your music is properly licensed. And the thing you want to look for is royalty-free music. And that means you don't need to pay royalties to the rights holder each time the song is used. There are some services that allow you to have a subscription. And as long as you are subscribed with that provider and release episodes during that subscribed time, you won't have to pay royalties. But as soon as you end the subscription with them, you will not be able to release anything else new containing that music. Or there's things that you can just buy one-off and for like a flat fee, and then use that whenever. So some options are Epidemic Sound. They have music, they have sound effects. Their pricing tier is a subscription based. I've used them in the past. There's also Pixabay, which has some free options, I believe. And then there's also, I think, Epidemic Sound. I can't remember another one. That Premium Beat, I think, allows you to have a subscription based, and also buy songs one-off, which is what we've done in this second season of our podcast. So again, just like hosting platforms, there are a myriad of different music services out there. Just kind of depends on what you want to do and how you want to pay for it. I think the best option is if you can find a friend who has a band or something and make them do it and record that and use that, but that's hard to do. But yeah, this is what the options are if you want to pay for something. The third thing we'll talk about are remote interviews and how you can conduct them. They're very important in this world of podcasting, allow you to connect with multiple guests in different areas. You can get by using things like Zoom or whatever other, video conferencing software that you use, but to ensure high quality audio and video recordings, it's beneficial to use tools that are dedicated for this. So platforms like this allow you to record separate audio and video tracks and provide backups and basic editing capabilities that make managing podcasts easier than just using a regular video conferencing tool. So some of the main options I've included here in this list. So Riverside is one I'm sure you've heard of. There's Descript, Simplecast, and Zencastr. So Zencastr is the one that we use right now. It's pretty good. Has a lot of different options. It's getting up to speed with Riverside, which has some really cool AI features and allowing you to create shorts and short form content. That's really neat. I've used Riverside before. But then we ended up switching to Zencastr, but they're starting to get some of those clips features now too. So both options are really good, very popular, and can help you so that when you log in and finish recording it, what they do is they kind of have they store it locally on your computer and then slowly push up to the cloud so that you always have a backup in case something goes wrong. And definitely something that you want to use if you are conducting remote interviews. The fourth thing we'll take a look at are branding and design tools, which are essential for establishing the identity of your podcast. So, I actually worked with a designer to help me set up what our cover art would look like, what our episode art would look like, what our logo would look like. But if you don't want to do that, there are tools you can use like Canva, which I'm sure you've heard of before. It's used for a variety of different things, really not just, podcast stuff. You can use it for a ton of different things. But ideally you want some kind of tool so that if you do customize your episode art like we do on our podcast, you have something that allows you to easily tweak that. And so the main tool that I use in that, not only as a developer, but just for my podcast is Figma. And so, as you can see here, this is actually my Figma for Culture in Between. Let me go into one file here. So I have, like I said, I had a designer that helped us create kind of what the episode art would look like. And then this is like when we put it up as kind of a audio file just on YouTube, what that looks like. But it allows me to kind of go in, I can change out the flags. I have a mask here that allows me to put the image of our guests behind it. And it just is really easy. If you notice, there's here's all the list of different episodes that we have. And then we just have our design assets here. Again, this is what the designer gave us. And so here's kind of our logo in different formats, kind of the color palette that we use, all these kind of things. And all this can be managed in Figma. So the designer shared the file with me, and then I've kind of taken it, and then now I kind of duplicate things as I create new assets for new episodes. But Figma is one I highly recommend. Let's see, I think there's Sketch you can use. A couple different options. Adobe Express is a good free option, alternative to Canva. But yeah, you definitely want something that you will want to use to be able to allow you to create different art forms for if you want to create YouTube videos around your podcast, all those kind of things. Using a tool dedicated to that is helpful. Last but not least is scheduling software, which is probably my favorite topic on this list because Culture in Between is a guest-heavy show. And once I found a tool that made scheduling our guests and adding automations easier, it was a game changer for us. So if you are a show like Culture Between that predominantly interviews guests, you will definitely want to find software that will make this process easier for you, because going back and forth with email, like, are you available this day, are you available that day, becomes a pain, especially when you're trying to maybe schedule multiple guests around the same time frame. So probably the behemoth in this space is Calendly. I'm sure at some point everyone has gotten a Calendly link. I think they're used a lot in enterprises. They do have a free plan, but I don't believe it's super generous. I haven't used it myself. I've seen Calendar, which is one I don't hear about that often. But I set up a phone call with somebody at one point, and they sent me their Calendar link, and I looked into it and saw that they have a free tier as well. So this is a lesser known option that I've seen, but the one that I use and really love is cal.com. And cal.com, I'll probably do a dedicated video to this because it can do so many things, but is a little bit outside of the scope of this particular video. But you can set things like I have my after work hours here so that I can only schedule at certain times. There are things, I have workflows here. There are event types. So I can have multiple link types. You can see my list of bookings. I'm not going to show you that because of privacy reasons, because we have some guests scheduled at the moment. But for example, these workflows that I have set up, one allows you to, 7 days before, we'll send you a link to our guest handbook that gives guests a list of the sample questions we ask them, just to kind of prep them for the interview ahead. Then we have a day before follow-up, just reminding them of their interview. And then 2 weeks after the interview, we send out an email asking guests to send us a headshot that we can use, like, for example, what you saw in Figma. So, like I said, cal.com is really awesome. I'm really glancing over a lot of things here, but it's the one that I use, and they have a very, very generous free tier for individuals. It seems like Teams is really where they make most of their money from, but I use it, and it's amazing. Hope you found some useful tips and tricks in this video. Maybe even found out about some tools that you never heard of before that you can leverage with your podcast. Starting a podcast is a really fun endeavor. I wish you all the best of luck. It's a labor of love for sure, especially when you're starting out just like we are at Culture in Between. But I hope you found something that should help you expedite the process and make it a bit easier for you. Again, if you want to show us some support, feel free to subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or subscribe to the YouTube channel, where we'll try to provide not only content on our episodes, but also some general podcasting tips as well. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time.